Okay, so now we've finished this overlay section. It looks quite good. So what we need to do now for the final part is we're going to try and work on this timeline section. So as you can see, once you click on the titles, what it does is it displays a corresponding image. So we're going to try and work on that now. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new component in a components folder, and I'm going to call it timeline.csx. Cool, and then now let's just create the component. So I'm going to import useState because we're going to need to do some state management in this component. So what I'm going to do now is I've got some data that's already got some images and corresponding titles and stuff, so I'm just going to import that now. Yep, so here's the data. It just comes in an array. It's an array of objects which contains the title, the question, the answer, and then the image. And what I need to do now is I need to create some state, which is called active index and set at active index, which will basically just keep track of which item within that array is active. And the one that is active is the one that will get displayed. And we're going to set the initial state to 0 so that initially the first item in the array will get displayed. Okay, so let's create like a container div now. Give it some padding on the y-axis of 20, and on larger screens we're going to give it the same, to keep it consistent with the rest of the page, we're going to give it px of 14 and 4 on mobile devices. Okay, now we'll just create the container for the title and for the whole left-hand side of the left-hand side of the component. So I'll just start the title now. Cool, now let's just import it so we can have a look at how it looks so far. Cool. So the text's a bit bigger, so let's just change the size. Well, that should do for now, actually, that's not too bad. So now what we'll do, we're going to map over our FAQ items, which is the array that's holding all the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to map over it, and just for now, for each item in the array, we're just going to display some sort of text, and also we're going to get the index as well, which is basically keeps track of which item is active at that present moment. Just give it a key of index. So this is the container div that's going to contain the title and the description. Item.title for now. Item.question, sorry. As you can see, it's displayed it, but I need to put this within the same div. Yep, just paste it in there now. Perfect. As you can see, we've got each item of each array. Each item of the array displayed the titles right now. So now I'll just give it some styling. And a border. Now we want to do some conditional rendering, so some conditional styling. So we'll say if the item is active, if the active item is equivalent to the index item, we want to give the border a darker color. So just to show which one's been selected at the moment. Great, as you can see, one is selected, which is the first one, which is the initial state, which is selected now. So as you can see, the border's gone dark. Now we'll just start the question. The title, should I say? Obviously, I've labeled a question, but that is a mistake. It's a bit misleading. So we want to give this some conditional rendering also. So we'll say that if the title is selected, or if the item in the array is selected, we'll give it a heading, we'll give it a darker color. And if it's not selected, we'll just give it a lighter grey color, which obviously indicates which item has been selected and which hasn't. So it looks good now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to display the image. So as you can see, it's a flex row. So we're just going to display one side of the row will have the text and the titles and the descriptions, and then on the right hand side we'll just display the image. So we do that simply by just doing flex, and then given this class of this, we'll give this div a class of half, so it takes up half the screen. Okay, and the source we'll give it is, the source of the image will be the item in the array, and then we'll give it active index and then dot image. So what we're doing within the active index is we're selecting the item of the array using bracket notation. So basically, active index is a number. So we'll specify the number of the item in the array which we want to display, and then we'll use dot image to display that. So yeah, I just need to add dot image here. As you can see, so that is the first item of the array, hence why the first item is being displayed. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to create an onClick function so that every time we click on one of the titles, we set the index. So as you can see, yep. Now that we click each title, we're setting the index. So active index changes every time we click. And as you can see, active index of each image changes simultaneously with the click, so that's working well. So now we're just going to create the text. So we'll just write within the item.answer, which will display each again, like I said, I've named them a bit confusingly, but that should really say description. So each description is now shown. But what we want is we want the descriptions to be hidden until they are clicked on. So to do that, as you can see here, we want each item, each description to be hidden. So to do that, we're going to use frame of motion here to work some effects. So we'll just set the div to a framer div, motion.div. Which import frame of motion now as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set the initial state of each description to have an opacity of 0 and a height of 0, which will basically hide everything for now. And then we want to set an animate, which will run the animation. And what we're going to do here is, if the active index is equal to the index, which basically means if this item is selected, we want to make the opacity 1 instead of 0, and then we're going to make the height auto instead of 0. So what that will do is the height will basically, if we set the height to auto, it will just display whatever is within. As you can see here, we set the opacity to 0. And here we're going to set the height to auto if it's been selected. So if active index is active, then we'll set the height to auto, which basically just means it will display the height of whichever, or whatever's within the div will get displayed, basically. If I was to make that 20, for example, then the height would automatically go to 20 every time active index is equal to index, but auto will just give the height of whatever's within that div, as you can see here. So now whenever each div is active, the opacity goes to 1 and the height goes to auto. Perfect. Now let's just create that little button on the bottom. Fairly straightforward. Yep, so I'll just give it a bit of padding on the y-axis. Yeah, that looks good. We'll just give it a bit of a transition, hover transition basically. Yep, now let's just set the transition just to make it a bit smoother. That looks a bit smoother. So let's change that, it's a bit slow, so we'll change it to 0.3. So now we want to create that fade animation on the images, as you can see. So we'll just wrap everything in animate present. We're going to give this a class of wait, so mode wait, which ensures that the exit animation for the components are complete before the enter animations for the new components start. So this will create a smoother, more controlled transition between components, and it avoids like an overlap of animations that can occur if components enter and exit simultaneously. So it just ensures that animations don't overlap. And obviously, because we've got two animations happening simultaneously, the wait just ensures that it just determines the behavior and ensures that the other animation is complete before this one runs, basically. As you can see, it's still popping and we haven't actually got the animation yet, so what we're going to do is we're going to set the opacity from 0, and then we're just going to change the opacity to 1 using animate. And then we'll just give the transition some properties, so we'll just give it a duration of let's give it 0.5 seconds. And we'll give an ease in out, just to give it a more smoother effect. And there you have it, nice little fade animation. So next, what we're going to work on is this slider. So now this is done, we'll create a new component and call that slider. So I've just imported some images and I've created an array of images, which basically is what we're going to be mapping over to display them on our timeline, on our slider, sorry. So I've just imported some images from my public folder. And like I said, I've created the array called images. Obviously, we're going to use images for the slider, but you can use anything. You can use text boxes, you can use divs, you can use different things you'll be able to use in the slider. But for now, I'm just going to use images. Okay, so I've given that a background of grey, and I've added the title. So let's just start the title now. Now we're just going to create the next function slide. The previous slide function. So we're going to use this to determine when we're creating the click functionality. Okay, so what we're doing in this function is, we're just setting the state initially, which is basically current index and set current index, and then we're going to use this function. So first I'm going to do the previous slide function. We're going to use this function to slide between our array. So basically the previous state is prev, which is passed to set current index, which takes the previous state value as an argument. So this is basically because we need to update the state based on the previous value. So we're going to do some conditional logic here, which just checks if previous current index is 0, the condition handles the scenario when the current slide is the first slide. So this means that the slideshow will loop back to the last slide if the index is 0, if previous is equal to 0. But if previous is not equal to 0, the expression evaluates that previous is -1, meaning the index simply decremented by 1, moving to the previous slide. And then we can just copy and change it and just do add instead of -4. Next slide. Okay, so now we're gonna create our div that contains the images. Give this an overflow of hidden. And we'll just set some width and height values. So we're going to create another motion div. And then we'll just map through our images array. So here we're just going to give our image the source of, so we're going to create another div that will contain the image, and then within that we'll create our image. Give our source image.source. So now I've got all our images. Give it some classes, so we'll just give it a bit of padding. Object cover, just to ensure that it fills the div completely. Give it a little bit of rounding as well. Cool, now let's just give the outer div some styling as well. So I'm going to give this a minimum height as well. And a minimum width, sorry, and a height of 20 rem. And then obviously because we've given object cover, that the image will stretch perfectly to fit the outer div. Cool. So now what we need to do is so now let's just give the motion div some properties. What we're going to do is we're going to set the initial 0, x to 0, and then once x is less than current index, we're going to multiply by 320. So basically, this specifies a horizontal target position based on the current index value. So basically, x minus current index times 320 means that the div will move to the left by 320 pixels times the current value. So if current index is 0, the position will be 0. If that makes sense. And then we're going to add spring, which means the animation will have a springy and more natural bouncy feel. And the stiffness 300 will controls how stiff the spring is. So just make it a bit snappier. And the damping, it just reduces the bounce value when you add damping. Cool. So now we just need to create some buttons to test our effect. So you have draw some icons from the React icon library. Some padding. Yep, now I just create the right function, just change up right arrow, sorry, just change up the icon, perfect. We'll just give that the next slide click. As you can see, works perfectly. It really is that simple. So what we want to do now is we just want to create the dots in the middle. Yep, so we'll just create that in the middle, and because we're using justify between, we'll just space everything perfectly. So what we're going to do is now we're going to map through images again. I'm just going to use an underscore here because we're not actually going to be using anything. And all we need is really the index, so we'll just use underscore as a placeholder. Simply just using the index here. We're going to make this clickable as well, so if you do click on one of the dots, it will take you to the corresponding slide. And we'll do it so that if the current index, we'll do more conditional rendering, so if the item is selected, if current index is equal to index, then we will just give the dot a darker color. So we can do that now. So now let's just add the onClick function. So we're just going to add a dot saying if any of these items is clicked, then just set the current index to index. Perfect, there you have it. This looks like it's done to me. Maybe fix some padding, yeah. And just make the title a bit larger. You should add some hovers to the button as well. Cool. So what's left now is the footer. I don't think there's any confusing logic in there. So I'll just create the component and then just a lot of Tailwind styling. So yeah, I'll just leave you lot to watch through that. And there you have it. That is our high converting homescape landing page built using Tailwind CSS and Next.js. Frame of motion for these beautiful little animations. Yeah, so hope you found that helpful, guys. And I will try to do some more videos like this in the future. So thanks.